first, you're going to need some thick paper. I'm using acrylic paper, but you could use watercolor paper or basically anything you have available. You'll also need a pair of scissors, a ruler, and I always find that a pair of offset tweezers help a lot. I also have tape. You can use scotch tape, masking tape, and glue. And I have a couple of paints that I will use, but you can use whatever you have available. And of course, you need an old Polaroid case. You can use any size, but I'm just using the mini. And of course, you have to have a cat to accompany you during this process. I also suggest you get some reference pictures of the movie scene you choose. I'm using a movie still from the Little Prince film and also an old reference picture from the original book. So the first step is to prepare the Polaroid case. First, you have to break down that little tab to stop it from jutting out, and you can just toss that aside. And then you can use your tweezers or just your hands or scissors to pluck out the inner layers of plastic that are on the back of the Polaroid case. Now, I would suggest you try to take them out in one piece so that you can use them later to trace out on your paper. It's a lot easier to gauge the size of the box without having to measure anything. So depending on the number of layers you choose to do, you would trace out the same number of scenes onto your paper. Now I chose to do very simple 2 layers, and I'm starting with drawing the background, which as you can see from the reference pic consists of a sun and a couple of stars in the background that I will cut out later. So now I'm working on the second layer, which is the planet, the prince, and the rose. So I decided to do the planet separately because the prince and the rose were going to be quite difficult to cut out if I drew them together in a conjoined shape. So that explains why I'm drawing the prince kind of floating on top so I can cut it out as its own separate piece. And then of course I did the same for the rose, which was its own separate piece, and the stalk is really thin, so that was definitely very challenging to cut out later on. I'm so happy I didn't attach it to the planet on hindsight. So at this point, I'm putting on the first layer of color, and I'm going in with some watercolors before using the gouache as a top layer. Now, I find that the colors I chose turned out a little bit muddy. Maybe I'm just a little bit out of practice, but I think I would have definitely planned the colors out a bit better before starting. On hindsight, I would have definitely erased off the pencil linings of the little prince. I feel like it made him look very dull and very muddy, and it's too late for me to change it, but I hope you learned from my mistake. So from your second layer onward, you're going to need to draw a small little folding tab underneath the scenes so that you can insert them into your box and so it can stand up. And at this point, I'm just adding some more embellishments to my background. I am adding the stars that I cut out initially. Can I just say those took forever to cut out? I think I nearly went blind because I didn't have an X-Acto knife. I just used my regular scissors. So at this point, I started working on the second layer, and if you line them up, you can kind of see or predict how the whole box will look like and whether or not it looks too crowded or whether it looks cohesive. So definitely make any changes before you put anything into the box. At this point, I was just settling the final positioning of the little prince and the rose. Do you see how thin the rose stalk is? I would highly suggest to save yourself the trouble. If you choose a scene, try to choose something that is made up of like big block shapes, but I had no choice. My mom likes the rose scene a lot, so I just had to cut it out. Okay, things start to get a lot more exciting. We are going to glue in the background / first layer of your entire scene, and you're going to need to use a little bit of glue on the back of the Polaroid case, and the back of the case is a little bit lumpy, so it might take some time for the background to stick down completely. So after sticking the background in, I just felt like it looked so dull. I used some of my Pearlescent paint to add a little bit of shimmer to the background. Because this is meant to be like a 3D piece, definitely consider adding more like glitter or embellishments or things that shine differently in the light, because it can add a lot more dimension to your piece. Here, I thought that the paper stars were so boring and so flat. I added some pearls or like pearl looking beads onto the background as well. Again, just to make it like pop a little bit. And as you can see, I was very impatient. I didn't wait for the background to dry, so please press down your background in regular intervals. So you see, when I move it, you can kind of see everything shining differently. Okay, now we're going to start piecing everything together. What you're gonna do first is fold up that bottom tab of your second layer or third layer. And basically, I'm doing it once front ways and then the other way as well, just so it's a bit more malleable. See, and you get one nice layer. And to do a final check, just slot your layer into your box to make sure that nothing is being blocked. You can always cut out some of the sides if you want it to be more centered. And at the end, you just need to put on a good amount of glue so that you can stick on the layer into the Polaroid frame. And I feel like the shadows look so good in this shot, if I say so myself. And of course, please make sure you use your tweezers and press the layer down and just leave it to dry. And then you're basically done. Woo! So I added some more paper flowers on the border, you know, if you're feeling a little bit extra. And this was my mommy's Mother's Day present. I mean, she better like it, honey. I worked so hard on it. And to give you more ideas, this was the first one I ever did. It's from the Grand Budapest Hotel, and it has 3 layers. So Zero and Agatha are actually in the middle of the scene, and I love it. It's so cute. It's one of my favorites. And I also have a Coraline one because I freaking love that movie. This one has technically 3.5 layers because Coraline is kind of like coming out of the portal, you know? So I don't have video footage of these because they're with my boyfriend. But this is a scene from Fantastic Mr. Fox. I think the background looks very layered because it was actually just a bunch of painted paper stuck together. So it gives it that 3D effect without me having to do many tabs. And the only other 2 layers were the label and the paw. So this was one of my favorites as well. And this was the Battle of Hoth that I did for my boyfriend's birthday this year. And oh my gosh, guys, this was so technically challenging. This has 4 layers. So it has the background, the 2 monster robot things in the middle. There are 2 separate pieces. I'm sorry, I don't watch Star Wars. And then the final front piece with the little man running away. And to be extra creative, you can see that I used 2 strings to emulate the lasers coming out of the robot. So this is to encourage you to think out of the box, no pun intended, and to play with the dimensions with whatever materials you have at home. I hope that this video inspires you to maybe use an old Polaroid case you have lying around, or you can probably do this with any small plastic box you have in the house as well. If not, I hope you enjoyed the video, and thank you so much for watching. See you soon. Bye!